I hail from rural roots, a country boy through and through. Following my completion of junior college, I tied the knot with my high school sweetheart, Jody. Yet, Jody harbored a longing for the glitz and glamour of high society. She pored over the society pages, subscribed to every glossy magazine chronicling the lives of the elite, and even perused automobile magazines during dentist visits, familiarizing herself with luxury cars. She possessed an acute awareness of designers and their fashion lines, yearning for a life beyond our means. In an attempt to accommodate her desires, I secured a position at a posh feed store in Omaha catering to the yuppie clientele. This move brought us closer to urban amenities while allowing me to pursue my passion. I excelled in my role, providing exceptional service to customers and earning flexible working hours as a result. Initially content with city living, Jody eventually sought employment herself, necessitating daycare for our children. Despite this, they adapted well to their new routine. Jody found employment with a medical device firm, relishing the office environment, which afforded her opportunities to dress up and interact with non-farming individuals. As she delved deeper into her career, her focus shifted away from our family life. I found myself shouldering the majority of childcare responsibilities, from drop-offs and pickups to meal preparation and housekeeping, while she meticulously tended to her wardrobe and appearance. We had diligently squirreled away savings each month with the goal of eventually purchasing our own feed store. However, despite our dual incomes, our savings dwindled. Daycare expenses accounted for some of the drain, but the bulk vanished on beauty treatments, salon visits, and designer clothing. I struggled to comprehend how our financial situation had deteriorated despite our increased earnings. Attempts to broach the subject with Jody were met with defensiveness and hostility, prompting me to create a separate savings account to safeguard our future goals. She began putting in extra hours at work, engaging in secretive phone conversations, and showing less interest in our intimate moments. Her desire for a flashy new car and talk of cosmetic surgery hinted at a desire for something beyond our marriage. It was evident to me that she was involved in an affair. Though I might be considered a simple man from the countryside, I wasn't naive. At this juncture, salvaging the marriage wasn't my priority. I simply wanted to address the situation and move forward before it escalated further. Pinpointing the exact details was challenging since I wasn't acquainted with her colleagues, but my gut told me the affair, if any, was likely with someone from her workplace. I had the fortune of working alongside a couple of reliable fellows. While they lacked formal education, their work ethic was admirable. Despite my managerial role, I never exploited my authority. The work flowed smoothly as everyone understood their responsibilities and cooperated seamlessly. This approach fostered a strong bond, and Chad and Daniel would prove to be invaluable allies in my endeavor. I couldn't ignore the pattern. Every Wednesday, Jody dressed to the nines, donning her fanciest lingerie and outfits, clearly putting extra effort into her appearance for work. Sensing an opportunity, I confided in my colleagues, who graciously offered to cover my responsibilities on those days. Parking near the entrance of the Russell Medical Plant, I used the time to catch up on technical reading while keeping a watchful eye. Around 11 a.m., my suspicions were confirmed when Jody emerged from the building and headed for her car. Following her wasn't difficult, and within minutes she parked at the Holiday Inn, choosing a secluded spot far from prying eyes. Soon after, a stranger in a red Lexus arrived and parked at the opposite end of the lot. When they both headed towards room 125 and disappeared inside, my heart sank, confirming my worst fears. Feeling a mixture of disappointment and queasiness, I realized I needed a plan. Returning to work, I resolved to take my time strategizing my next move. Before leaving the parking lot, however, a surge of frustration prompted me to sabotage her car, snipping 2 of her valve stems with my baling wire cutters. In hindsight, I should have considered targeting his vehicle as well, but anger clouded my judgment at the moment. The remainder of the day crept by at an agonizing pace. After work, I fetched the kids, prepared dinner, and waited for her to return home. When she finally did, I casually inquired about her day, to which she mentioned having a flat tire. Apparently, one of her coworkers had kindly changed it for her. We left the matter at that, without further discussion. The following morning, after dropping the boys off at daycare, I swung by the plant. It didn't take me long to spot the red Lexus, conveniently parked in a reserved spot with a sign bearing the name Felix Brooks, Distribution Manager. I made a note of it. Through Chad's wife, who worked in the personnel department at Russell, I swiftly gathered intel on Felix. It turned out he was already married and had a history of misconduct, including inappropriate behavior towards a colleague and financial discrepancies in his expense reports. Armed with his personal details, from his address to his social security number, I couldn't yet fathom what I'd do with the information. By evening, Chad, Daniel, and I had completed a productive day's work, allowing us to unwind with a beer before I had to fetch the kids. While I tried to maintain a composed and rational outlook, beneath the surface, my anger simmered, exacerbated by moments of silent tears. I felt broken, incapable of repairing the damage inflicted by Jody's betrayal. Enduring her presence became increasingly intolerable. I longed for closure, for an end to the torment. The following day brought another stroke of luck when I recalled that one of my valued clients, Batty Russell, happened to be the wife of the president of Russell Medical Company. While I hadn't met him, Batty and I shared a great rapport. I made a conscious effort to be extra cordial with Batty, contemplating whether I could leverage our relationship to my advantage when her daughter Karen approached us. Karen, in her final year of vet school, joined our conversation as Batty headed to the barn for some chores. We ended up chatting for about an hour, and I found myself enjoying her company, albeit with a tinge of guilt that quickly dissipated after I left. During the weekend, I spent some time in the garage working on a project. Using my welding skills, I fashioned a small piece of flat steel and affixed 4 sharp points to it, crafted from concrete nails for maximum hardness. The resulting plate, measuring about 6 by 6 inches, would serve as my initial tool for exacting revenge through harassment. I crossed paths with Batty again on Tuesday, feeling somewhat downcast as I unloaded the order, my usual jovial demeanor conspicuously absent. My subdued mood didn't escape her notice, piquing her curiosity. "Bob, what's weighing on your mind today? You seem a bit down," Batty inquired, her concern evident in her voice. "I've got some personal issues, Batty." "Sorry, I'm not the best company today," I responded, my mood dampened by the weight of my troubles. "Let's grab some coffee and you can talk to me about it," she suggested, leading the way back to her impeccably designed kitchen, reminiscent of a magazine spread with its stainless steel and granite accents. I couldn't help but think how much Jody would adore it. Seated at the table, Batty placed the coffee down and leaned in, prompting me to open up. "Well, how can you help me, Batty?" I hesitated, unsure of whether I wanted to burden her with my problems. "I won't know unless you tell me what's going on," she reassured me. Reluctantly, I began to share my concerns. My wife, Jody, works at Russell Medical, and I suspect she's being pressured into a relationship with one of her superiors, but I can't prove anything. "Why do you think this is happening?" Batty inquired, her brow furrowing in concern. "It's mostly little things, but last week I caught them together at the Holiday Inn. Jody doesn't know I know, and I'm at a loss for how to broach the subject. I don't know if she's being coerced or if it's something she wants. Our family life has suffered. She seems indifferent towards the children and me. The secrecy is what truly bothers me," I confessed, the weight of the situation heavy on my shoulders. "Who is this man?" Batty asked, her tone firm. "I believe his name is Felix Brooks. I'm not sure if Jody works directly under him or in a different department. I've never met him." "Would you like me to look into it?" Batty offered, her voice filled with determination. After a moment's hesitation, I nodded. "If you think there's a discreet way to handle it, I'd appreciate your help. I don't want to cause a scene." "All right, let me see what I can do. I'll bring those oats next Thursday," Batty promised, her resolve evident. Grateful for her assistance, I thanked her before preparing to leave. "Where's Karen?" I inquired as an afterthought. "She's away at school, but she'll be home this weekend. Why don't you bring the boys up so she can meet them?" Batty suggested with a smile. As I left, a glimmer of hope flickered within me. Perhaps things would turn out better than I dared to hope. Perhaps this weekend would mark the beginning of a brighter chapter for me and the boys. The following morning, as rain poured down relentlessly, Jody meticulously prepared for her routine, yet seemingly significant day. I observed silently, holding back any remarks as I dropped the kids off at the daycare center before heading to work. My colleagues had everything arranged to cover my morning shifts. Chad would utilize my truck to handle deliveries and log entries, with me providing my initials upon my return. Meanwhile, Daniel arrived with his cousin's van, equipped with a floor jack loaded with our modified steel plate. After ensuring all the necessary arrangements were in place, they set off for their respective tasks, leaving me to make my way to the Holiday Inn. True to form, Jody arrived promptly and parked in her usual spot, followed closely by Felix. Once they disappeared into the room, I allowed them a brief moment to settle in. Despite the pouring rain, I swiftly retrieved the jack from the van and maneuvered it towards Felix's car. With practiced efficiency, I positioned the jack under his engine block and raised it, the concrete nails piercing the oil pan with a satisfying pop. Swiftly moving to the rear of the Lexus, I repeated the process, this time puncturing the fuel tank. Oil and gasoline began to spill out as I returned the jack to the van, the entire operation completed in under a minute. Next, I made my way to Jody's car, cutting slices into 2 valve stems as I had done before. Satisfied with my actions, I prepared to depart. As I drove past Felix's now compromised vehicle, I casually flicked a lit cigarette out the window before speeding away. In my rearview mirror, I caught sight of flames erupting from the car, followed by the deafening sound of an explosion. Despite the chaos, a sense of relief washed over me. Joni arrived home from work later than usual, skipping dinner and heading straight to bed. I spent some quality time with the boys, helping them with their evening routine before tucking them in. That night, I opted to sleep on the couch. The next morning, as I got the boys ready for daycare and we went about our morning routine, Jody remained in bed, showing no signs of getting up or engaging in conversation. Her absence at the breakfast table went unaddressed, and as we left for the day, I noted her car was conspicuously absent from the driveway. Around 9 a.m., just as we finished loading up the trucks, Lieutenant Jack Clark paid me a visit. Despite his friendly demeanor, his unexpected appearance piqued my curiosity. "Can you tell me about your schedule yesterday?" he inquired. "It was a typical day, regular deliveries, nothing out of the ordinary. Why do you ask?" I responded, puzzled by his line of questioning. Clark requested details about my whereabouts around noon, prompting me to retrieve the delivery logs from the previous day. As I laid them out before him, detailing each stop with its corresponding time and my initials, a faint smirk appeared on his face. "That's quite a meticulous log you've got there. Do you maintain this level of detail every day?" he remarked, a hint of amusement in his tone. "Would you like to review the logs for the past month?" I offered, unsure of where this conversation was leading. He declined, his smile lingering as he finally revealed the reason for his visit. There was a vehicle damaged at the Holiday Inn in East Oman yesterday, and we're trying to ascertain if anyone had any knowledge of the incident. "Why approach me?" I questioned, sensing a connection to Jody's absence. "Well, another vehicle parked nearby had 2 valve stems cut, coincidentally belonging to your wife's car. We're exploring if there's any correlation," he explained, shedding light on the situation. His words left me with a mixture of concern and uncertainty, wondering about the implications of Jody's involvement in the incident. Firstly, I'm baffled as to why my wife's car was at the Holiday Inn parking lot. Secondly, what does that have to do with the damaged car? I questioned, trying to make sense of the situation. The damaged vehicle belonged to a colleague she had a lunch meeting with. Apparently, they were meeting some company clients at the hotel, and the incident occurred during their lunch, Lieutenant Clark explained, shedding light on the circumstances. "Did you speak to the people they dined with?" I inquired, hoping for some clarity. "No, unfortunately, they couldn't recall their names," Clark responded. "Are we going to have an honest conversation here, or are we going to dance around the issue?" I pressed, feeling the need for straightforwardness. He leaned back in his chair, a small smile playing on his lips. "Do you happen to know a man named Felix Brooks?" "I've never crossed paths with the man, I can assure you of that," I replied earnestly. "I believe you," Clark said, nodding. "I prefer not to meddle in domestic matters, and I hope I won't need to return. Here's my card. Give me a call if anything else comes up, all right?" We shook hands, and he offered an apology. "I'm sorry for bringing this to your attention. If there's anything I can do to assist, don't hesitate to reach out." "Thank you, but you didn't really provide me with any new information," I noted as he walked away. "Put the pieces together," he called back over his shoulder. Later that day, upon returning home from work with the kids, I noticed Jody's car in the driveway. She appeared casually dressed and had dinner prepared. She mentioned feeling unwell and calling in sick, but made no mention of the previous day's events. I opted not to broach the subject either. As she retired to bed early, I took care of the boys once again before settling on the couch for the night. The next day, as I departed with the boys for daycare, Jody was already bustling about, preparing for work. After dropping the boys off, I made a stop at the doctor's office to request a check for STDs. The rest of the day proceeded as usual for a Friday. Upon returning home, Jody was once again present. During dinner, I casually mentioned my plan to take the boys to spend the following day at one of my customers' farms. While extending the invitation to Jody, I anticipated her inevitable decline. As expected, she cited some shopping she had in mind, and I didn't press the matter further. Whether it was shopping or a clandestine rendezvous, the outcome remained unchanged. Saturday, spent at the Russells' ranch with Karen and the boys, was a delight. We reveled in a day filled with laughter and joy, with Batty's delicious lunch adding to the festivities. Karen bonded effortlessly with the boys, and they reciprocated her affection wholeheartedly. However, Mr. Russell's absence meant I still hadn't had the opportunity to meet him. Batty made no reference to our previous conversation, and it seemed Karen was oblivious to any underlying tension. It pained me to bid farewell and return home, but alas, all good things must come to an end. Back at home, Jody displayed no interest in our day's adventures. Her indifference was palpable as the boys attempted to share their excitement with her, only to be met with disinterest. Eventually, they ceased their efforts. She did inquire about my sleeping arrangements, noting my absence from the bed. I concocted a vague excuse about work-related sleep troubles, which seemed to satisfy her curiosity. And with that, the matter was laid to rest, never to be broached again. The following week proceeded without any remarkable events. On her birthday, I observed that she hadn't made any special arrangements, leading me to presume that our planned rendezvous for the day had been called off. That suited me fine, as I had a backlog of work to tackle. I took the opportunity to visit a divorce attorney recommended to me, who provided me with informative handouts and brochures, including some intriguing fill-in-the-blank forms. Everything resumed its usual routine until the next Wednesday. On that day, she began with her usual morning routine, followed by meticulously styling her hair. She adorned herself in alluring new black lingerie, applied a fresh fragrance, and even appeared to be wearing new shoes. Careful not to betray my curiosity, I swiftly departed with the boys, anticipating a planned outing. After dropping them off, I discreetly swung by the workplace and noted a shiny new Mercedes SL occupying his parking spot. I hastily recorded the license plate number before rushing back to my tasks. The excitement among my colleagues mirrored my own. We expedited the morning deliveries and manipulated the logs once again, despite suspecting that Jack Clark could see through our facade. Nevertheless, we persisted. We enjoyed an extended and leisurely lunch break. While Chad continued with deliveries, Daniel procured 2 sizable bottles of hydrochloric acid from the swimming pool supply store. Meanwhile, I opted to spend my lunch break with Jack Clark. Jack shot me a puzzled glance as I entered his office bearing pulled pork sandwiches, fries, and a couple of Cokes. Offering a cheerful greeting, I settled into the seat opposite him. His knowing smile hinted that he sensed something was amiss. I casually suggested we share lunch and catch up on the latest developments in the car damage case, realizing I needed to keep him occupied for a couple of hours. It promised to be an extended meal indeed. While I engaged in small talk with Jack, Daniel was executing his part of the plan down at the Holiday Inn parking lot. He meticulously applied acid to the Mercedes, targeting the trunk, fenders, deck, convertible top, leather seats, floor mats, and even the dash. To further ensure damage, he introduced mothballs into the gas tank, knowing the havoc it would wreak on the engine if ignited. Any remaining acid was meticulously spread across the tires. Before departing, he discreetly tampered with the valve stems on Jody's car, a task completed in a mere 15 minutes. Despite our prolonged conversation, Jack eventually voiced his suspicion. "What the hell are you up to?" "I just wanted to ensure I had a solid alibi in case anything happened to Felix Brooks's car today," I casually remarked. "What's so special about today?" Jack inquired. "The pulled pork sandwich was on special," I replied with a smirk. With a swift motion, I pulled out my cell phone and dialed the daycare center. "Hi, Jessica. It's Bob Bryant. I'll be stuck at work this afternoon. Could you call Jody and ask her to pick up the boys? Thanks a bunch. You can reach her at 874-4329, extension 125. Make sure to catch her as soon as you can." "Okay, thanks again." Jack reclined in his chair, chuckling to himself as he savored the taste of the pork sandwiches. The room fell into a brief silence before Jack spoke up again. "Do you think I should call Mr. Brooks and inquire about his car?" "Why on earth would you want to do that?" I questioned. "Do you happen to have his contact information handy?" Jack pressed. I provided him with both Brooks's cell number and the number of the Holiday Inn room 125. "Take your pick." Jack activated the speakerphone and dialed the hotel number. After a few rings, Felix Brooks picked up, sounding out of breath. "Hello, who is this?" "Mr. Brooks, this is Detective Clark. I wanted to inform you that we're still investigating the vandalism to your car," Jack stated calmly. Brooks sounded startled. "Why are you calling here? How did you get this number?" "I'm a policeman, Mr. Brooks. Have you acquired a new car yet?" Jack inquired. "Yes, I have." "Why do you ask?" Brooks replied, sounding wary. "Just making sure we don't encounter a repeat of the last incident. Is the car with you now?" Jack queried. "Yes, it's parked out in the lot," Brooks confirmed. "Is everything all right?" I inquired. "Let me check," Jack responded. We listened as Felix muttered in the background, presumably peering out the window at the parking lot. There were a few indistinct noises followed by a low groan. He returned to the phone. "Something seems off. I'll have to get dressed and go check. I'll call you back." "Fair enough, but Mr. Brooks, why aren't you dressed already?" I probed. "None of your damn business. I have to go," he snapped before hanging up abruptly. Jack glanced at me with a satisfied grin. "Happy?" "Absolutely. Anyway, I have to get back to work. If you need anything, give me a call, all right? Maybe we can do lunch again next week." "I hope not. This needs to end soon before someone gets hurt," Jack remarked gravely. I returned to my tasks. Chad had ensured the logs were in perfect order, and Daniel had discreetly disposed of the acid bottles where they wouldn't be discovered. The evening at home promised to be eventful. Jody had picked up the boys but retired to bed early without a word. The following day, Jack paid me a visit. He detailed the extent of the car damage, explaining that Felix's insurance claim was pending due to the previous Lexus incident. The vehicle was deemed totaled, leaving Felix out of pocket by over $60,000. Despite Jack's assurance of my innocence, Felix remained convinced of my involvement. While Jack may have suspected my role, he couldn't prove anything, and perhaps, deep down, he didn't want to. As for Jody's tires, I never inquired, and no one volunteered any information. Since Jody had remained silent about the whole ordeal, I resolved it was time to put an end to it. My STD test results came back negative, reassuring me. I had already completed the paperwork for the lawyer to initiate the divorce proceedings. I intended to take the boys out to the Russells' ranch over the weekend, just in case Karen happened to be there. If not, we'd spend the day with Batty. The only unresolved issue was the lack of concrete evidence regarding the extramarital affair. The weekend turned out well. Karen was present, much to the delight of the kids, and we all enjoyed ourselves immensely. It felt like we were a family again, a feeling I sorely missed, as did the boys. Karen remained oblivious to the turmoil brewing, though thankfully she didn't pry. Before bidding farewell, Batty gave me a reassuring wink and assured me that everything would work out. I received an enticing job offer about 100 miles away. It offered more pay, a superior position, and the possibility of buying into the business in the future. It seemed like the perfect opportunity, except for the fact that it would take us away from Karen. The following Wednesday, Jody went through her dress-up routine once more. I wasn't sure what kind of car her boyfriend was using, but it was evident she was preparing for another rendezvous with him. I assumed they were still frequenting the same place. I knew I had to take action, but I hadn't devised a plan yet. As the guys and I pondered our next move, Batty Russell unexpectedly pulled up. She gestured for me to join her in the car and drove us silently to the plant. Parking in the rear, we entered through a private entrance directly into Mr. Russell's office. Batty facilitated introductions, and his secretary promptly served us coffee. We engaged in light conversation for a while until I couldn't contain my curiosity any longer. "Was there a specific reason you brought me here?" I finally asked. Mr. Russell chuckled. "It's time to wrap up this charade. Batty has briefed me on the situation, and we've conducted a little in-house investigation. Once everything's set, we'll proceed. You should have all the necessary information by day's end. If I do anything that embarrasses you, Bob, I apologize in advance. It's not my intention to cause you any harm." We continued chatting to pass the time, and Batty noticed my grin when the topic shifted to Karen. Despite my attempts to remain discreet, I evidently failed. The ringing phone captured everyone's attention. Mr. Russell's demeanor shifted as he took the call. "What's happening?" "All right, thanks for the update. You know what to do next, correct?" Mr. Russell's smile returned. "Everything's set. We can proceed. Felix and your wife are in their usual room at the Holiday Inn. Felix drove a company BMW, which is a violation of company policy, so it's being returned to the plant. Unfortunately, it seems your wife also has a couple of flat tires. Seems to be becoming a bit of a tradition." He activated the speakerphone and dialed the room. "Felix, this is Mr. Russell. Apologies for the interruption, but we need to discuss a crucial matter," Mr. Russell began. Felix's response was hesitant, marked by stuttering. "Yes, okay, no problem. How did you get this number?" "That's irrelevant, Felix. What's pertinent is that the legal department has been alerted to a potential sexual harassment situation. I need accurate answers from you. Is there a female company employee with you in the room?" Mr. Russell inquired. There was a momentary silence, followed by indistinct background chatter. "Yes, sir, there is," Felix replied. "Felix, is she there willingly, or are there any elements of coercion or threat involved?" Mr. Russell pressed. "No, sir, absolutely not. There's been no coercion whatsoever. She's here of her own volition. I didn't compel her to do anything," Felix clarified. "Excellent, Felix. Your honesty on this sensitive matter is appreciated. We'll draft a statement to confirm that. Now I need to speak to the young lady to verify. Could you put her on, please?" Mr. Russell requested. More murmurs filled the background before Jody came on the line. "Sir, how can I assist you?" she asked. "Jody, did Mr. Brooks coerce or threaten you in any manner to accompany him?" Mr. Russell inquired. "No, sir. He didn't threaten me at all," Jody responded. "Good to know. So it was consensual, and you weren't subjected to any intimidation. Is that correct?" Mr. Russell sought confirmation. Another brief pause ensued, followed by hushed discussions. Eventually, Jody returned to the line. "Yes, sir, it was consensual." "Excellent. When you and Felix return to the plant, we'll have the statements ready for you to sign. Can you put Felix back on, please?" Mr. Russell requested. "Sir, how did you know my name?" Jody questioned. "Don't concern yourself with that, Jody. It's inconsequential," Mr. Russell assured her. Once Felix rejoined the call, Mr. Russell instructed him to head back to the plant to sign the necessary papers in the legal department. After hanging up, Mr. Russell flashed a smile. "Batty, why don't you take Bob out for lunch and return in a couple of hours? By then, the legal team should be finished, and we can all resume our normal lives, Mr. Russell suggested. We enjoyed a delightful lunch, during which I struggled to contain my gratitude. Batty insisted that we refrain from discussing the matter further or mentioning what had transpired ever again. Additionally, she made me promise not to divulge anything to Karen. It was a promising sign. I shared my excitement about the new job offer with Batty, who expressed her happiness for both the boys and me. After lunch, we made our way back to the plant, where I obtained notarized copies of Felix and Jody's statements. Both affirmed that their affair was consensual. The legal team assured me that this evidence would be sufficient for my lawyer to proceed with the divorce. Felix and Jody were promptly terminated, their personal belongings already packed, and they were escorted off the premises. Unfortunately, neither of them had transportation available. Batty kindly lent me her car, assuring me I could return it the following day. With the papers in hand, I made a trip to the lawyer's office. Batty made multiple copies of each document. One set was designated to be sent to Felix's wife. At the bank, I closed our accounts and settled all outstanding credit card balances, promptly canceling them. Next, I contacted the gas, water, electric, and phone companies to arrange for utility disconnection by Friday afternoon. A visit to Jack Clark ensued, where I cheekily informed him of my virtuous behavior, eliciting laughter from him. I informed the landlord of my impending departure and bid farewell to my colleagues at work, receiving well wishes tinged with regret. Daniel accompanied me to the Russell Ranch with my truck, facilitating the return of Batty's car. As I prepared to pick up the boys and head home, a sense of apprehension crept over me. Upon arrival, Jody's absence from the driveway caught my attention. Inside, she sat on the couch, tears streaming down her face, a stark departure from her usual stoicism. 2 boxes of her personal belongings from work lay nearby. After tending to the boys, I stood by her side, silently offering her the chance to speak. "You just had to do it, didn't you? You had to ruin everything in my life," she choked out between sobs. "Why couldn't you just mind your own business? You had no right to interfere in mine." I was astounded by her self-centered perspective, still viewing the situation as if it solely revolved around her. She showed no regard for our children or me, let alone Felix's wife, Amelia. Our family, our life, and our plans held no significance to her. Her sole focus remained on her own actions, indifferent to everything else. Yet strangely, I felt a sense of relief knowing that I wouldn't be tethered to her for the rest of my life. Without a word, I retreated to the shower. Later, as I prepared the boys for bed, she retreated to the bedroom, shutting the door behind her. The following day, I brought the boys to work with me, ensuring that everything was in order and that Chad and Daniel could manage the system I'd implemented. We gathered boxes from various stores in preparation for the move. Passing by the Holiday Inn, I noted Jody's absence, assuming her car had been repaired by now. Repairing the flat tires must have severely depleted her shopping budget for the past month. Upon our return home, Jody was nowhere to be found. We only packed clothes and toys, leaving the rest for Jody to handle. Little did she know, by the next day, all the utilities would be shut off. Filled with anger, I took the boys out, leaving Jody watching silently as we drove away. We spent the night at a motel, seeking refuge from the turmoil. The next morning, I dropped the boys off at daycare, leaving Jessica some cookies and party favors as a token of appreciation. It was the boys' last day, and I wanted them to enjoy it with their friends. Before leaving, Jessica pulled me aside. "What happened with your wife last week?" I didn't want to pry, but now that you're leaving, I'm dying to know, Jessica inquired. She was really upset when I called. She demanded to know where I got that number, and when I mentioned you gave it to me, she started swearing up a storm. She didn't say much when she picked up the boys, but I could tell she was fuming. "I'm sorry, Jessica. I kind of set you up," I admitted. Jody was having an affair. She was at the Holiday Inn with her boyfriend, and I thought if I got you to call and interrupt their party, she might reconsider the whole thing. But it didn't work out like I hoped. Instead, she ended up getting mad at both of us. I'm serving her with divorce papers this afternoon, and the boys and I are leaving for a new job right after I pick them up. It was a low move on my part, and I apologize for dragging you into it. I visited my divorce lawyer, finding everything neatly prepared. Custody of the kids was granted to me, with Jody granted visitation rights at her discretion. Frankly, I didn't anticipate her taking much interest in them anyway. As for the rest, our assets were divided evenly, although there wasn't much to divide. There was no spousal support, child maintenance, or financial settlements of any sort. I relinquished all the furniture, appliances, and household items to her. I had no desire for them. She kept her car, which I gladly relinquished, as it had become notorious for its recurrent flat tires. Handing over the papers to Jody seemed like the final formality. Unless she contested it, the divorce would be finalized within 3 months. Attached to the divorce paperwork was a notarized statement from Felix and Jody, with a marginal note from the lawyer indicating that these statements would remain confidential if all terms of the divorce were accepted. No further inquiries were made. As I pulled up to the driveway, seeing her car there assured me she was home. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, grappling with a surge of conflicting emotions. I had loved Jody deeply. She was the only woman I had ever been truly close to. I had always assumed our relationship was normal, failing to recognize any dissatisfaction on her part. Her actions were deceptive, yet I couldn't help but feel partially responsible for my lack of attentiveness. Knocking on the door of my own home felt surreal. When she opened it, she looked weary, and her offer of a drink seemed to emphasize the distance between us. I handed her the papers, but she didn't immediately open them. Instead, she held them in her hands, her gaze shifting from the documents to me and back again. "Why?" I asked, unable to discern whether her expression conveyed anger or sadness. After a brief pause, she finally opened up, her tone tinged with a mix of resentment and regret. "He smelled like aftershave, you smelled like fertilizer. He wore our many suits while you wore jeans. He dined on lobster and steaks, while you preferred ribs and burgers. He owned a London fog overcoat, while you had your Carhartt. He drove a fancy car, while you drove a truck. His nails were always manicured, while yours were perpetually dirty. He had a prestigious career, while you remained a farm boy. Need I continue?" she retorted. "I yearned for a life that you couldn't provide, Bob. I'm sorry we got married. I did so for all the wrong reasons. I saw you as an escape from my parents, failing to look beyond the immediate. I was foolish to believe you could fulfill my desires. I love my children, but I regret having them. It sounds awful, I know, but I lack maternal instinct. I hoped finding someone who could fulfill my dreams would bring contentment, but it only deepened my dissatisfaction. I misled you. I failed as a mother, but I'm not sorry for pursuing my aspirations and seeking something better." "What about his wife? What about your husband? What about your children? What about your family?" I interjected. Her demeanor shifted abruptly. My questions seemed to provoke anger, and any semblance of remorse vanished from her expression. "I couldn't care less about any of that. It's my turn now. I want to live the life I've always dreamed of. A husband from the farm and 2 messy kids don't fit into that picture. I've got your damn papers, so just leave and let me get on with my life," she spat out bitterly. Her words made my decision simple. I turned and walked out without another word. When I picked up the boys, Jessica offered to make more phone calls if needed. Later, I called the utility companies and asked them to delay disconnection until the end of the month. Despite everything, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sympathy for her. 3 months later, the divorce was finalized without a hitch. I never heard a peep from Jody. According to the lawyer, everything proceeded smoothly as planned. While my new job was fulfilling, I missed out on the opportunity to buy the business. Someone else snatched it up, along with a prime quarter section of land. My boss mentioned they intended to turn it into a horse breeding farm. While my job remained secure, my aspirations of owning my own place took a setback. 2 weeks later, construction commenced next to the feed store. We speculated on what was being built, and eventually, one of the guys approached the site engineer for answers. To our surprise, it was revealed to be a veterinary clinic specializing in large animals. It piqued my interest momentarily, but I brushed it off as wishful thinking. Remarkably, the entire building was erected in less than 60 days. The new owner was scheduled to make an appearance on Saturday, prompting the boys and me to swing by during our lunch outing, filled with a sense of curiosity. Suddenly, both boys began excitedly yelling, "Karen, Karen." There she was, looking radiant as ever, accompanied by Batty. Karen had pursued her veterinary degree and now aimed to raise show horses while managing the large animal clinic. As she showed the boys around the new facility, Batty and I caught up. We all went out for lunch together, where Karen shared her plans to build a new home on the property to be closer to her work. The ride home that evening was filled with joyous grins from ear to ear. 5 years later, Karen's passion for raising beautiful horses had blossomed into a thriving business. Her clinic was renowned for its success. Meanwhile, I had expanded my ventures, now boasting 6 feed stores. The boys had gained 2 baby sisters, whom they adored dearly. Every weekend, my mother-in-law Batty and Mr. Russell, whose first name I never did learn, visited us without fail. However, Jody never made an effort to visit the boys. The second story. Could anything else possibly go wrong? It feels like this terrible period of my life just won't end. Surely things can't keep spiraling downward forever. I have to catch a break somewhere along the line. Work has become a daily struggle just to survive, and the one person I trusted more than anyone else is the one causing me the most grief. Maybe I should explain how it all began. My name is Mike Edwards. I met my wife, Batty, on my first day at Herald Engineering. I was 18, fresh out of school, nervously starting my first job a few weeks after my final exams. I had done well and could have gone to college, but I knew it wasn't for me. I'd had my fill of education, and my parents couldn't afford to support me through 3 years of university. Batty was the human resources assistant handling company inductions, and she was drop-dead gorgeous. It took me 3 months to gather enough courage to ask her out. I was convinced she would reject me, and I hadn't even thought of where to take her. But to my surprise, she said yes and even asked where we were going. Fast forward 20 years, and unbelievably, we were both still working at the same firm. We'd also been happily married for 18 of those years. I headed the project management team, while Batty had risen meteorically to become the director of human resources at the sizable engineering plant. Everything was fantastic. We had 2 great kids, Zara, 16, and Tom, 14, who were both thriving, a lovely home, and a comfortable lifestyle. Steve Hayes had been my closest friend since primary school. We became buddies with Will Flores during high school, and our friendship endured. Will's younger brother, Eric, joined our circle a few years later. Among us, Eric was the only bachelor. The rest of us were married, and our wives had known each other for years. Eric was more career-focused than the rest of us. I recommended him for a position at our company, and I was thrilled when he landed the Director of Operations role. It was a lucrative job, and we celebrated his success. Eric mentioned that he was surprised to get the job, as Mr. Harold had been quite tough on him during the interview. 6 months later, the 4 of us were having drinks on a Friday night when I mentioned that my wife, Batty, had been acting strangely lately. I thought one of the other wives might have mentioned something to my friends, especially if it was a health issue, but nothing had been said. My friends were concerned, agreeing that Batty's behavior was out of the ordinary. I confessed that the idea of an affair had crossed my mind. My friends didn't believe it, but they asked why I thought that way. I struggled to explain it, only saying that something just felt off. Eric hadn't spoken up until that point, but then he vigorously defended my wife. He said he worked with Batty, and there was no way she would even consider looking at another guy. Furthermore, he insisted I was foolish for ever thinking she would. I found it odd, almost like a rant, how vehemently Eric defended himself. Glancing around, I could see I wasn't the only one taken aback. I recalled his flirtatious behavior with Batty, the jokes, the subtle touches, plus those business trips they'd taken together since working at the firm. I stared at him, trying to piece things together. He didn't react, but guilt started to show in his eyes, and he became visibly agitated. Will, who knew Eric better than anyone, sensed it too. Looking at his younger brother, Will said, "Please tell me you're not that stupid." Almost simultaneously, I almost shouted, "So when did you start sleeping with my wife?" Chaos ensued. We both stood. I lunged towards him, but Steve and Will managed to keep us apart. Will took his brother outside and warned him to back off. "But I'm your brother," Eric protested. "I mean it. Back off before I take matters into my own hands. You're a stupid, arrogant asshole." Steve and Will tried to calm me down, suggesting it might not be as bad as I thought and that I should talk to Batty to get the truth. Reluctantly, I agreed and headed home. When I got there, Batty was sitting at the kitchen table, tears streaming down her face. "I guess Eric called to warn you then. Is it true?" Batty didn't deny it, but she downplayed it, saying it wasn't an affair. Supposedly, they messed around during a business trip. But my investigation revealed that messing around equates to cheating. She swore it was a one-time, alcohol-fueled mistake, but I wasn't convinced. Will staunchly defended her, but I suspected there was more to the story. I'll admit, my reaction was harsh. Whether it happened once or 100 times, cheating is cheating, and I felt completely blindsided. Batty couldn't explain her actions, and her apologies felt hollow. In the months that followed, we separated and headed for divorce. It was bad enough, but things got worse when I found out Batty was seeing Eric again. That pretty much confirmed my suspicion that there was more to it than just a one-time mistake. The pints with Steve and Will stopped. It was awkward since their wives were friends with Batty. They did ask to hang out, but I wasn't in the mood for company, and I had little money to spare. I also assumed they'd be socializing as a group, especially with Eric being Will's brother. Losing your wife to one of your best friends was a miserable experience. It felt like I had lost my entire life. Batty won custody of our 2 kids and kept our house. I knew Eric spent time there, yet I was still paying for half of the mortgage plus child support. All I could afford was a tiny flat in a rundown part of town. This didn't help with the kids. They weren't too keen to stay over and wanted to spend time with their friends who all lived near our old house. Initially, I took them out for days out, spending any spare cash I had on trips, which we had all loved and done regularly since they were little. But then the conflicts started. They were going on a city break with Batty and Eric, then a school trip away, then staying over with friends. It seemed like there was always an excuse. In the past 2 months, I barely saw them, and I really missed them. If it weren't for their sports activities, I might have lost touch completely. I used to always be involved in their sports events and coached them both in football. Batty never showed up, preferring to take some me time, but now both she and Eric attended everything. At halftime during Zara's football match, I asked Batty why she was there. She got defensive, saying they were her kids. "You never bothered before." Well, I thought it would be good for the kids to see our support for them, especially through our breakup. As long as you're doing it for them and not for yourself or to prove a point, you wouldn't be so shallow as to flaunt your new boyfriend in front of me. Don't be ridiculous. We're done, and I have no interest in you anymore. As she said that, she nestled into Eric's arm. I walked away, biting my lip yet again. Work felt like pure torture. I had to endure seeing Batty and Flores regularly. The worst part was the never-ending barrage of comments from the guys in his team. They seemed to relish in baiting me. I knew they were seeking a reaction and somehow managed to keep my temper in check. Thankfully, my team was a saving grace, especially a new hire named Kenny. He was ex-military, only in his late 20s, and had lost both legs. He didn't delve into what had happened, so I didn't ask. Depending on his level of pain, he either used artificial legs or shortened versions he called stubbies. He was reserved and quiet, mostly keeping to himself. But when it came to logistics, he was a master, retaining vast amounts of information and responding to complex changes with ease. One day, to my surprise, he quietly asked why I was putting up with so much nonsense. I attempted to explain my tales of woe and struggles, but immediately felt foolish considering everything he must be dealing with. He gave me a serious look. It comes down to a simple choice: get busy living or get busy dying. Did the military instill that in you? I asked. He burst into uncontrollable laughter. Not a chance. It's too profound. It's a quote I ripped off from the film Shawshank Redemption. The British infantry version would be, "Just get on with it, you wonker." I joined in his laughter, realizing it had been months since I'd had a good laugh. I glimpsed a glimmer of hope when Maggie, an accountant at the firm, asked me out. Dating hadn't crossed my mind, so her invitation caught me off guard. I'd known Maggie for years. She was divorced, but a truly lovely person. We went on a few dates before Batty caught wind of it. There were rumors that Batty had been belittling her, even calling her names, but I never had any proof. When Maggie came over to meet my kids, they behaved horribly. They ignored her at first, then started parroting their mother's negative opinions of her. I was mortified by their behavior and made sure they knew it. Maggie, being gentle by nature, became visibly upset, insisting on leaving despite my apologies. I told the kids to go back to their mothers, struggling to keep my temper in check. I tried calling Maggie numerous times, and when she finally picked up, she explained that she didn't want to create any problems with my family. It was better to end things now rather than later. I was devastated. It felt like no matter how hard I tried to do the right thing, I just kept getting knocked down. It was as if I should just throw in the towel. Then Kenny's words came back to me. I was in search of some positives in my life when Zara dropped the bombshell that Eric had promised to buy her a car and driving lessons for her 17th birthday. I was seething, but I told her that I needed to discuss it with her mother first. Zara stormed off in a huff. I called Batty to inquire how my 16-year-old daughter was on the verge of owning a car without my knowledge. You know, I wanted to be the one to teach the kids to drive, and I definitely don't want her owning a car yet, I said. Why not? It's a generous gesture from Eric. Don't be upset just because you can't afford it, Batty replied. So you'll be fine with her cruising around to parties with her friends. Do you have any idea how many accidents involve kids her age? I wanted to ease Zara into this. Let her use our cars until she's more mature and we can trust her, I retorted. Oh, well no, I hadn't thought about that. I guess that could be a concern, Batty admitted. And since when am I cut out of all the decisions involving the kids in favor of your boyfriend? I questioned. I'm their guardian, she insisted. Wrong. We're both their parents. You just happen to have custody. Next thing I know, you'll be telling me that jerk wants to adopt them, I said incredulously. Don't be ridiculous. I agree we should have consulted you first. I'll tell her we won't go through with it, Batty conceded. Great. So I'll be the bad guy again, ruining her chance of a car, while Eric gets to be the hero. Are you two deliberately trying to cause problems between me and Zara, or is it just a special talent you both share? I grumbled. Of course not. Eric is just trying to be supportive and bond with the kids, Batty explained. Tell him to back off. He has you and seemingly my kids, but I'm their father. I have the right to be included in these decisions, I insisted. I'm sorry, okay. Her words lacked sincerity, dripping with disdain. How many times are you going to apologize after making selfish decisions? Try changing your actions instead. Think about someone else other than yourself. You and Flores are certainly meant for each other. You're like two peas in a pod, I retorted. What is that supposed to mean? You sound jealous, Mike. You were the one who left me, remember? If you hadn't, we would still be making these decisions together, she shot back. And you're the one who blew it. It's pointless to bring it up again. We have to do what's right for the kids. I don't want them spoiled. They should earn things and be self-sufficient. Zara can get a part-time job if she wants to save up for a car, and then we can help her, not just hand her everything on a plate, I argued. Batty's comment about not being able to afford to help angered me. That was because I was still paying the mortgage and child support. It was infuriating, especially seeing as Flores seemed to be spending a lot of time there. Trying to deal with Batty was like repeatedly banging my head against a wall and getting the same result. I had scrimped and saved, thinking I could just barely afford it. I called Batty to confirm the kids would be there on Friday for our weekend visitation. Surprise, surprise, they had a trip planned and forgot to mention it to me. I had to put my foot down and mention the family court before she finally agreed I could come over on Friday to see them before they left Saturday afternoon. Standing in our familiar kitchen, memories flooded back. The kids were at the table, Batty at the counter, just like old times. I brought up the idea of a holiday, the one we had dreamed of for years, a European road trip in the summer. Zara wanted to explore European capitals, while Tom was keen on via ferrata climbs and adventure sports in the Alps. It wouldn't be cheap, but I was willing to spend all I had and even borrow more. The kids were excited, discussing the places we could visit. Finally, a positive response, just as I had hoped for. I noticed Batty looking pensive. That was supposed to be our family holiday, Mike. We planned it together. Well, we can't do it together now, and it's probably our last chance before Zora starts vacationing with friends, I replied. Just then, Eric sauntered into the kitchen like he owned the place. Tom eagerly shared our plans with him. Eric nodded approvingly. Sounds great, he said. Then he added, I guess we'll do our holiday another time. All three of them turned to him simultaneously, asking, What holiday? I was thinking of a summer-long trip across the United States. Eric explained, you guys can pick the route, but it could include Disney, then hopping over to the West Coast, hitting LA, and driving the Pacific Coast Highway. Zara interjected excitedly, Oh my God, that sounds like an amazing trip. Could we add New York to it? Tom replied, Don't see why not. We could stop there for a few days on the way back to Blighty to break up the flights. Tom immediately launched into questions about the rides at Universal and whether they could also visit Busch Gardens or a Six Flags park. He was a big fan of thrill rides. In that moment, I couldn't have hated anyone more. He knew he had me. I could hardly insist on a lesser trip when they were so thrilled. I stood up and quietly walked out of the kitchen, doubting anyone even noticed me leaving. As I reached my car door, Batty caught up with me, Mike, I'm sorry about your trip. Answer me honestly, Batty. Is this the first you've heard of this holiday? Well, yes, I don't think Eric had the chance to tell us about it. I'm sorry it conflicts with your plans. Come on, Batty, you're not that naive. He just made it up on the spot, and I can bet nothing is booked. He's taking my kids away from me, and you're aiding him. What did I do to deserve this? I'm sure it's just an innocent mistake. I'd had enough. You keep apologizing and then repeat the same actions. So here's what's going to happen. Tell your boyfriend this. The next time I face any issues with access to my children or being excluded from parenting decisions, I'll take it up with him directly. Are you threatening us, Mike? Talking to you is like talking to a wall, so yeah, I'm trying a different approach and we'll deal with the consequences. You wouldn't harm us. Maybe not you, though you deserve it, but he's due some payback. You and him should think carefully before putting someone in a position with nothing to lose, and that's exactly where you've put me. I glanced up to see Eric standing at the door. I half expected him to attack me, considering he was bigger, but he just scurried back inside the house. I noticed the disappointment on Batty's face, although she quickly masked it. You see, a real man doesn't resort to threats of violence. No, it seems he just runs away. I took a breath, turning to Batty. Are you trying to gain their favor and push me away? They're my kids, not his. I like to think I'm a good dad. You should want me involved instead of playing these pathetic games. Batty seemed at a loss for words. It's not. You are. This shouldn't be a competition, but let's be honest. You've won, I've lost. You have the house, the money, our friends, the rich boyfriend, and the kids. But your winning doesn't mean I have to lose every time, Batty. The old Batty would have realized that long before me. She just stood there, mouth open, unable to speak. For God's sake, I give up. I want to talk to the kids again tomorrow without that jerk. I got into my car and drove off, leaving Batty standing there, looking like a deer caught in headlights. Before entering, I made sure Flores wasn't around. The kids slouched on the couch in our old living room, looking like it took great effort, while Batty stood at the doorway. Don't worry, I won't take up much of your time. There was no verbal response, but Tom managed to look up at me. I know the breakup is hard for you both, and I wanted to remind you how much I love you. Your mom does too. That will never change. Batty looked surprised that I had included her. But I don't understand what's happening with you guys. I can barely recognize you these days. You're great kids, but now you've developed this snotty attitude like nothing is good enough. I love you to bits, but I deserve better than to be messed around. If you want to move on with your mom and Eric, I will back off. If you want stuff and big holidays, then Eric is your man. What I won't do is show up every weekend to hear some lame excuse about you being busy." Batty tried to interrupt, I hardly think. "Yeah, well, I've heard enough of what you think, and I am talking to my kids potentially for one of the last times. I can't buy you the things he does, but I'd still like to spend time with you both, do sports, go camping, whatever it is you want. I know it's not Florida or wherever, but it would be us together, and you'll both be off to college in no time at all." Still, no response other than looking awkward and fidgeting. The way you guys behaved with Maggie was unforgivable. What gives you the right to treat someone in that manner? That is not how we brought you up. I've never been so embarrassed of my own family. I hope you're all happy. She won't have anything to do with me. Batty riled at that. Well, she wasn't good enough. She. Really, Batty, what did she ever do to you? She's a lovely person, and all she did was agree to go out with me. You were supportive when we married, and I never criticized him. But well done, you've scared her off, all because you're worried about my psycho ex-wife and kids. I winced, realizing I had said all of that and sworn in front of the kids. Both Zara and Tom looked shocked. That information seemed to be a revelation to them. Turning to Batty, I continued, and another thing, thanks to Flora's rubbing lack of funds into my face, I checked with the child maintenance agency, and they reckon I should have offset the mortgage against some of the child support. So you can expect an assessment and revision. Maybe Loverboy can step up and pay towards my house that he seems to be living in. Zara piped up, looking at her mom. Dad's still paying. Her voice trailed off, and Batty was back to her goldfish impression. The kids didn't look much brighter. It didn't seem like I was going to get a response out of any of them. I stood up in frustration once again, mumbled something about letting me know, and left. I returned to my cramped apartment, pondering if I could afford to move elsewhere. I hadn't mentioned to Batty that my lawyer advised me to continue with the mortgage payments and reduce the child support. It ensured a roof over my kids' heads, but he suggested it might also turn out to be a good investment with property prices soaring. Eventually, when Tom moved out in a few years, she would either have to sell or buy me out. My phone rang, and it was Zara. I found myself wondering what new challenge life had in store for me. "Hi, Zara," I answered, and she quickly explained that Tom was also on the line. She spoke rapidly. "We figured out that we owe you 6 weekends and 4 weeks of vacation, and we were wondering if you still wanted to go on that tour through Europe this summer. We could visit the Black Forest, see the Alps, and travel down through Italy." Her words tumbled out in a nervous rush. "Do you remember those places?" "Of course, we've talked about it for years, and it should be a lot warmer than Scotland." "And Dad, well, we're sorry about how he acted. Mom never mentioned that it was her who cheated. We thought it was you, and that it must have been with Maggie. And Eric made it sound like he was paying for everything after you left us. I don't care as long as I can be with my kids again." Tom chimed in, "You're wrong about Eric. We don't really like him. He's a jerk." I tried not to laugh. Really, I did. "That's not the impression you gave me, Tom. We thought that if you weren't seeing us, well, that you might come back." "That is never going to happen, Tom. Things are over between me and your mom. She's moved on, but I want to be there for you both." Zara took over for Tom. "The thing is, Dad, we think Mom feels the same way. Eric isn't really around that much, but he shows up when you're supposed to pick us up. They argue a lot, and it's often about you." "I find that hard to believe. Your mom's been nothing but a thorn. Well, she's been difficult to deal with since we split. I'd go as far as to say she hates me." "I don't think so, Dad. I think she knows she made a mistake." I sat in Batty's human resources office at work, my nose throbbing, attempting to prevent blood from staining the luxurious carpet beneath me. Batty's expression was one of fury as she entered the room. "Jesus, Mike, fighting at work is gross misconduct. I will have to dismiss you." "What's the matter? Afraid of losing out on child support?" I retorted. "It's pathetic, grown men fighting. You realize we had to call an ambulance for Clinton." "Good, he deserved it. I think I did quite well considering there were 3 of them. Grow up, Mike. This is a total disaster. It's so bad, the old man is coming in. Suddenly, Flores burst into the room. I tried to suppress a smirk at his swollen lip and bruised cheek. He immediately began demanding that the police be called and the assault reported, in addition to my immediate dismissal, claiming that he and half of his team had been attacked. I looked at Batty. Do you want to know what actually happened before you sack me? I thought that was your job, after all. A deep voice resonated across the room. I do. I turned to see Old Man Harold, the chairman and founder of Harold Engineering. He rarely visited the factory these days, but still exuded an imposing presence and reputation. Strangely, Kenny was standing next to him. Flores launched into an explanation. It was an unprovoked attack in the canteen against me and 2 of my team. An unprovoked attack by one man taking on 3 seems a bit odd, don't you think? Is that what happened, Mike? Harold inquired. Well, I probably swung first, but seeing as I was outnumbered, I wasn't going to wait around, I confessed. I thought I saw Harold stifling a smile. Batty interjected, We will have no option but to dismiss you and call the police, Mike. You had already threatened Eric. I heard it myself. Nothing somebody says can justify an assault. Shouldn't you ask what provoked it? I interjected. I presume it's jealousy over mine and Eric's relationship, Batty replied. No, it's been months of harassment by him and the guys from his department, Eric exclaimed, almost hyperventilating. That's total rubbish and just a pathetic excuse, Eric retorted. Kenny spoke up then. I can confirm everything Mike said is true. Eric looked at him with disdain. Who the hell are you? If you know what's good for you, you'll keep your nose out of other people's business. Harold intervened. Kenny is my grandson, and I believe him all day long over someone like you. I got over my surprise and produced my phone, skipping back and pressed play. Hey Cucky, our boss was late in this morning. He was probably giving your missus a good scene too. The recording played out. Everyone in the room shifted uncomfortably. I caught the look Batty gave Flores. I flipped through the notes again. You know she slept with him for months before you 2 broke up, right? Did you know that? Are you one of those people who likes to see your wife openly cheating? Batty's face turned crimson, while Flores shouted, This is total bullshit. I skipped back again. The next voice was Flores's. It's a shame you were late for work all those times, Mike, and you didn't get the manager's role. I looked at Batty. Have you ever known me to be late for work, ever in all the time we've been here? He blocked it and told me so, told me to move away as it would happen every time. I switched to the recording from the dining room. It was Clinton Morgan's voice. Eric says she's great at what she does and really likes it. Once he gets her up to speed, we'll have a little party with all the guys. Maybe we can even get that cute little girl of yours involved. The sound of scuffling and the fight followed before the recording cut off. It was the last comment I reacted to. You're still the mother of my kids, and the mention of Zora, well. Batty glared at Flores, who shifted uncomfortably. I didn't know that idiot Clinton was going to say that. He was just trying to wind him up. Old Man Harold's voice cut through the tension. Officially, everyone involved is suspended pending investigation and disciplinary hearings. Unofficially, Tuner, get out of my building and take your buddies with you. Anyone calling the police will never work in the industry again. You're on borrowed time anyway. Worst appointment I ever made. Don't even think about contacting me. You'll regret it. He nodded at a security guard outside the door, who promptly came in and escorted Flores away. Turning to me, Harold said, In light of everything, I'd say you handled it well, but you should have come to me. Go home, Mike. Get cleaned up. Batty, we need to talk. I can't believe this type of behavior has gone unnoticed. Even ignoring your role in things as HR director, you should have been aware of what was happening. Tears streamed down Batty's cheeks. You do know it's not true, Mike. It wasn't months, it was once, and I regretted it as soon as it happened. I walked out with Kenny and thanked him for both the backup and the advice, offering to buy him a pint or many. I'd love to, but I have to travel for a regiment thing on Sunday. I usually just take myself off into the hills for some peace, but they've roped me in for something official. No trouble, next time though. And what's that about the old man being your granddad? I didn't like to broadcast it or take advantage. I was going to mention your troubles to him, but I figured you needed to find your own solution, and then I'd help. After all, he today that sheds his blood with me shall be my brother. I started laughing. Now I know that one is an old army quote, if you count Shakespeare and Henry V. Kenny chuckled. That's the one, Band of Brothers. They used it in officer training. It was a bit highbrow for the rest of us. Batty arrived at my flat that night, and though I let her in reluctantly, I couldn't help but inquire about Harold. He confirmed Eric's involvement, along with the other two in the fight. They're all being dismissed. Others in the team admitted to your harassment and claimed Eric put them up to it. I received a reprimand and a final written warning. Are they taking this to the police? No, the guys admitted to the harassment but want to keep it quiet. They're saying it was just a disagreement that got out of hand. Did you talk to Flores? Ask him why? He wanted you gone because he thought I still had feelings for you. He admitted the conversations were meant to push you to snap and get you fired, but you never took the bait. You just ignored them. Is he out of his mind? You don't cheat, lie, and treat someone like crap if you love them. You've been treating me horribly for months. I'd go as far as to say you even enjoy seeing me in pain. Batty burst into tears. None of this was supposed to happen. It was a mistake, and you weren't supposed to find out. You weren't supposed to leave me. Everything went wrong. I thought if you missed the kids and your life was miserable, you might give me another chance, but it didn't happen. Eric was just a tool to make you jealous. I don't have any real feelings for him. So you acted like a jerk because you wanted me back seriously. Take responsibility for your actions. Batty, you caused all of this. I don't recognize you anymore. The woman I married would never have done those things. She was kind and caring. Where did she go? I messed up when I realized you weren't coming back. After the divorce, I felt like I had to follow through. The kids, our friends, and my family wouldn't believe what I had done. Steve and Will refused to be in the same room as us. I haven't seen their wives or families in months. I had to prove I could make it work with him. Otherwise, I had thrown everything away for nothing. I had to prove I made the right decision and that he was the better man. My life with Eric had to seem perfect, and the more I diminished you, the better my decisions would appear. I tried to make it seem like a love affair, but it was never that. He was arrogant and selfish, but by then, there was no going back. What a mess, and you got the kids involved in all this. I am so sorry. I needed to try to make things right, but I had no idea how. I didn't realize how badly it affected your relationship with them. Great, yet another apology. I've heard what you said. I will change my actions, so I don't need to keep apologizing. At least it's over with him. He's gone now. And I need you, and so do the kids. They're really angry with me. I thought maybe we could try again. I've never stopped loving you. I couldn't believe it. I was so certain she hated me. It gave me pause for thought, but not for long. There's no way back, Batty. Not for me. The bond and trust we had are gone. I'm not trying to hurt you, just trying my best to cope and get my life back on track. I joined Steve and Will for a pint on Sunday morning, and they immediately laid into me for not returning their calls and texts. I tried to explain, but with our wives being close and Eric being Will's brother, it wasn't that simple. Will chuckled. He's no brother of mine. I haven't spoken to the guy since that night in the pub. Probably for the best, or I'd have knocked him out. Steve elaborated that the wives hadn't seen much of Batty at first, but they were in touch now, and she claimed to regret everything. She thought if she hadn't gone back to Eric and had been more reasonable, we might have reconciled. I wasn't entirely convinced, but it felt good to reconnect with friends. As we delved into other topics, I glanced up at the TV and saw Kenny in his full Royal Fusiliers uniform, laying a wreath at the Synodef in front of royalty and dignitaries. He was adorned with medals, including the Victoria Cross. I turned up the volume to hear the commentary recounting how Kenny had earned the Victoria Cross, rescuing fellow soldiers under heavy fire and repeatedly risking his life before being knocked unconscious by a rocket-propelled grenade. The commentary detailed his struggles through recovery. I was stunned. I hadn't realized the extent of what Kenny and others had gone through. My own problems suddenly seemed insignificant. Contrary to popular belief, life took a turn for the better once Batty and I sorted things out. I started spending more time with the kids than before, catching up on their activities and games. Our custody arrangement became flexible, allowing them to stay with me whenever they wanted, and they always seemed happy to be around. The child maintenance service reduced my payments as suggested, which helped balance out the mortgage. At work, I earned a promotion and a hefty bonus, thanks to Harold's desire to avoid any legal trouble. With things settling down, I found myself rekindling old hobbies and planning trips. So, you can imagine my surprise when Maggie showed up at my new place. We hadn't spoken in months, and I didn't think she knew where I lived. Welcoming her in with a mix of uncertainty and curiosity, I asked, "What brings you here, Maggie?" "I'm here on behalf of Zara and Tom," she explained. "They apologized and filled me in on everything. Zara mentioned you weren't seeing anyone." "How did they even find you?" I wondered. "Batty probably gave them my number," Maggie replied. I spoke to her, and she confirmed what the kids said, acknowledging that we both needed to move on. Things were getting surreal. "It seems both your kids and your ex-wife think highly of you, Mike," Maggie said. "They think I'd be a fool not to go out with you." Sliced bread. That seems a bit exaggerated, don't you think? I chuckled. Maybe more like the best thing since the steam engine. Sorry, it's an engineering thing. "I'd argue for the calculator or computers," Maggie quipped. "After all, I'm an accountant, but I'd like to find out for myself, Mike." "Yeah, I'd like that too, Maggie," I replied earnestly. And so, we started dating again. Our relationship grew from friendship and companionship to passion and intimacy, the kind of things money can't buy. Where it will lead, only time will tell, but for now, things are going well. Was it luck that brought us back together? Perhaps, but I like to believe that by no longer playing the victim, I opened myself to better fortune. I stopped tolerating the nonsense others threw my way and relearned how to stand up for myself. So far, the results have been fantastic, but I'll never take it for granted. Life has a funny way of surprising you when you least expect it. I hope Kenny's story is received with open hearts. With Remembrance Day approaching, thoughts turn to the significance of this day. It often feels like one of the rare instances where we truly honor our veterans. Including Kenny's story offered insight into Mike's struggles and spurred him to take action. The Victoria Cross stands as the highest military honor for valor in the United Kingdom. Yet, in the last 50 years, only 6 Victoria Crosses have been awarded, with 4 of them posthumously. Meanwhile, thousands of veterans face adversity every single day. The phrase, "get on with it, you wanker," demands sensitivity. It's clear that there should be a greater emphasis on supporting men's mental health, whether they are veterans or not. Lest we forget. The third story. The golden years I envisioned look nothing like this. Surveying the Wagon Wheel Acres dining room, all I see are elderly faces, real elderly. What's most disheartening? I'm among them. At 62, I refuse to feel this ancient. But the real kicker? Sitting at a table for 4, surrounded by strangers, while across the room, my wife Pamela sits with her paramour. The entire retirement complex knows, which adds salt to the wound. I meticulously chose Wagon Wheel Acres for its continuous care option and reasonable buy-in. Our combined monthly fees exceed $3,000, promising peace and convenience. Yet I never foresaw Robert Nelson's arrival. My appetite vanishes as I watch Pamela engage in lively conversation with Robert. 40 years I spent caring for her, and now he reaps the benefits of her companionship in our twilight years. It's been 2 weeks since Pamela confessed her intimacy with Robert and her intent to continue. That same afternoon, she relocated all her belongings to his studio apartment. Ours may have a bedroom, but it lacks Robert. I've never contested her decisions, never had the stomach for it. What does that say about me? Over the years, acquiescence seemed easier than confrontation. I pushed my lunch aside, feeling a surge of frustration as I retreated to my room. The thought of footing the bill for her stay here while Robert Nelson enjoyed all the perks gnawed at me. Despite years of striving to bring joy to my wife's life, my efforts seemed futile. It was as if Robert possessed some secret knowledge I lacked. In the reflection of my bathroom mirror, a business card, a token from one of the more assertive bachelors, caught my eye. Grabbing a cold beer, I sank into my trusty recliner, the lone relic in the room untouched by time. Downing 2 swigs, I scrutinized the gleaming card before me. Berkshire escorts, by the hour or by the day. The absurdity struck me. What could a 62-year-old man possibly do with an escort for an entire day? The notion of even extracting value from an hour seemed doubtful. Emptying the bottle of Foster's, I reached for the phone, my mind a whirlwind of uncertainty. I wasn't sure what I intended to say or do. Perhaps I just needed someone to talk to. Berkshire escorts, this is Richard speaking. I managed to utter those words before my nerves took over, leaving a conspicuous silence hanging in the air. Berkshire escorts, hello? Are you still there? Yes, hello, I'm here, I replied, my nervousness palpable. Richard here. Do you have a question for me? Richard's voice remained steady, offering a reassuring presence. How did you know? Well, most callers usually do have questions, he chuckled lightly. So, you're not psychic. Would you like to share your name? Peterson. It's Peterson. Is that necessary? Not really, but it does make conversation easier. My friend Kenneth gave me your card. Ah, Mr. Mitchell. Are you also over at Wagon Wheel? Yes. Is that an issue? Not at all. Why would it be? Kenneth mentioned that you've provided him with companions before, and he was satisfied. Well, that's good to hear. I might just have to give him a discount next time. I didn't know how to respond, causing a brief lull in the conversation. Peterson, are you still there? Yes, I'm here. I'm just not sure what to say or ask. Let me assist you. How long do you need company for? Probably an hour or 2. Just someone to have dinner with, maybe at a nice restaurant. An hour or 2 should suffice. That's all you're looking for. I'm not seeking intimacy, if that's what you're implying. Just a pleasant companion for a few hours. It felt awkward, considering Pamela was the only woman I'd ever been with. Peterson, our escorts charge $300 per hour. That's quite a sum just for dinner companionship. Yeah, I understand. When you say young lady, what age range are we talking about? Well, most of our escorts are under 30. That won't work for me. I prefer women over 50. I find younger women a bit too, well, let's just say I prefer maturity and class. Do you have any suggestions for someone older? Finding women in that age bracket in this industry is a bit challenging. I can search around for you, though. Will that change the price? I can't say for sure at this point. I have your number from caller ID. Let me look into it and call you back in about an hour. Is that okay? That works. If possible, could you arrange for tonight around 7? Where were you planning to take her? I was thinking of the Black Angus. Does that sound good? That should be fine, Peterson. Give me an hour. Feeling a bit relieved, I hung up. While Pamela and Robert would be having chicken patty parmesan, I'd be enjoying filet mignon. For the next hour, I meticulously went through my wardrobe like a teenager preparing for prom. I settled on a navy blazer, gray turtleneck, and tan chalky pants. I wasn't certain if Richard would come through, but it was worth a shot. I answered the phone after the 3rd ring, deliberately taking my time to avoid appearing too eager. Peterson speaking. Peterson, it's Richard. I have good news. Your escort will be waiting for you outside the Sheraton Hotel at 7. She'll be in a hunter green dress. Does that work for you? That's perfect. I might arrive a bit early, but I'll try not to seem too eager. And how old is she, by the way? Now, Peterson, you know better than to ask a lady her age. But for your peace of mind, your date this evening is 58. I trust she meets your standards of classiness. Any other questions? Just one. How should I settle the payment? In cash. Bring cash. The hours leading up to the evening flew by. Despite it being just dinner, the anticipation filled me with excitement. I craved the romantic ambience. Sure, there were plenty of potential dinner companions at Wagon Wheel Acres, but the idea of getting involved with any of them felt distasteful. Engaging with them would have felt like condoning my wife's affair with Robert. I couldn't accept their relationship, yet I felt trapped, unable to find a way out while still maintaining my dignity. But considering my current predicament, I decided to indulge myself for the evening and focus on finding a solution later. I left home a bit earlier than usual, wanting to give my Toyota a run through the car wash. It wasn't particularly dirty, but this evening felt special. Sure, it would have been nice to arrive in a more impressive vehicle, but I had to work with what I had. As I sat in the Sheridan parking lot, I found myself torn between not wanting to arrive too early and not wanting to keep my escort waiting. I cursed my lack of experience in these matters, feeling like a nervous teenager. When she finally emerged, I knew I'd made the right choice. She exuded class, her dress impeccably tailored without a hint of vulgarity. There was no mistaking her for anything other than a refined lady. At 58, she looked stunning, and for a fleeting moment, I entertained the idea of going all in. But reality soon set in. Talk was cheap, and I knew I wasn't cut out for anything beyond dinner. That was my limit for the night. With careful precision, I pulled up to the entrance and hurried around to open the door for her. Peterson, I presume. Yes, indeed. And how should I address you? Richard Peterson. Just Richard will do. She sported a mischievous smile as she caught my reaction. Her smile lingered as I circled back to the driver's seat. I don't quite understand. I thought you were arranging an escort for me. That was the plan, but I had a chat with Kenneth. Afterward, I decided I was the best choice for tonight. Is this a regular thing for you? She chuckled softly. No, not at all. In fact, it's been 6 years since I've been out with a gentleman. Did I come across as that desperate? No, not at all. But Kenneth mentioned you could use a little pick-me-up. And truth be told, I haven't had a nice evening out in ages. Now enough business. Can I have the lobster? Richard opted for a small fillet instead of the lobster. The evening unfolded just as I had envisioned. After dinner, we engaged in hours of conversation until the waitstaff discreetly hinted it was time to leave. She revealed she'd never been married and had entered the escort business during college. Over time, she'd risen to run her own operation, evidently proud of her accomplishments. As I began driving towards the Sheraton to drop her off, she provided a local address instead. It turned out to be a small brick house nestled in an exclusive neighborhood. The peculiar part was the for sale sign in the yard, standing out among the grand residences nearby. Walking her to the front door, I pondered my next move. Should I expect an invitation inside? Maybe a kiss goodbye? Or perhaps a simple handshake would suffice. She promptly resolved the dilemma with one of her charming smiles. I hope your evening was everything you hoped for, Peterson, she said, extending her hand. I nodded, reaching for my wallet. That'll be $300, please, she added. I hadn't anticipated this, but I should have. Now, I found myself smiling as I peeled off 3 bills from the wad of hundreds I had brought along. We were together for almost 4 hours, I pointed out. Yes, but that was my choice, not yours. I'll only charge you for the first hour. Is that all right? She explained. Of course, it was worth twice that, I replied sincerely. I observed as she folded the bills and slipped them into her bra with a deliberate motion, as if straight out of a movie. It seemed intentional, perhaps to catch me off guard. Richard, can we do this again? She inquired. Are you sure? I sensed a hint of seriousness in her tone, which intrigued me. Absolutely. I had a wonderful evening. I'd do this every night if I could afford it, I admitted. She chuckled. Why don't you come over tomorrow night around 6? I'll cook us something. I'd love to, I agreed, pausing before asking, how much will that set me back? $300, silly. It's always $300, she replied with a smile. At that moment, she took my arm and leaned in for a kiss, catching me off guard and heightening the excitement of the unexpected gesture. The following morning at breakfast presented my opportunity. I found myself observing Pamela and Robert from across the dining room when Kenneth pulled up a chair, inserting himself into our table group. Although he'd already eaten, he still held onto a cup of coffee. "Peterson, my friend, how was your evening?" Kenneth's inquiry left the others at the table puzzled. "Better than expected," I replied with a smile. "Way better than expected." Setting my plate aside, I grabbed my coffee and we made our way to the coffee urn. "Is that all you're going to tell me?" Kenneth pressed, his curiosity evident. "Kenneth, there's not much more to say. We had dinner, and that was it. Nothing beyond that. I didn't engage in anything more," I explained. "Well, then, what the hell did you pay her for?" Kenneth's bluntness caught me off guard, leaving me momentarily speechless. Unable to provide a satisfactory response, I remained silent as we settled into the lounge area with fresh cups of coffee. "Kenneth, could you do me a favor and procure some pills for me?" I asked, changing the subject. "Sure thing. Barbara can hook you up at $20 a pop. Her annuity dried up a few years ago, but she manages to stay here by selling them." "Ah, the wonders of free enterprise," I remarked dryly. "So, Peterson, who did she set you up with?" "I feel like I know all of them by now," Kenneth inquired, steering the conversation back to the previous night's events. It was clear from Kenneth's tone that he hadn't experienced an evening with Richard himself. I trusted her when she mentioned not having had a client in 6 years. In fact, I found myself believing nearly everything she had told me. Whether she was genuinely honest or an adept liar, the ability to deceive convincingly was undoubtedly an asset in her profession. "I think her name was Karen. She had a Slavic or Russian accent," I offered, choosing not to disclose the truth for some reason. As we continued chatting, Pamela and Robert strolled past, absorbed in their private world. My wife didn't spare me a glance or acknowledge my presence. No one would have guessed we were married. I heard Kenneth chuckle under his breath, earning him a playful jab in the ribs. Dinner with Richard was another memorable evening. While she wasn't a gourmet chef, she certainly knew her way around the kitchen. Kenneth had called earlier, insisting on being set up with Karen. Richard quickly caught on and arranged for him to meet one of her new recruits, an aspiring actress eager to showcase her Dr. Zhivago accent to poor Kenneth. I sensed that Richard appreciated my discretion in not revealing Karen's name to Kenneth. The evening ended all too soon, and as I bid her farewell, I received another kiss, accompanied by another $300. The following evening, we opted for sushi. While I knew what I liked to order, she effortlessly conversed with the waiter in Japanese, showcasing yet another impressive skill. She truly was an extraordinary woman, and I found myself yearning to spend every available moment with her. However, the reality of my marriage and the recurring $300 fee loomed over me like a dark cloud. Despite our extended time together, the cost remained consistent, leaving me perplexed and reluctant to inquire further. Things reached a breaking point that weekend when my daughter, Mary, paid a visit. Although she lived just an hour away, she only made the trip 3 or 4 times a year. This visit seemed different from previous ones. Upon her arrival, Mary bypassed our room, now solely mine, and headed straight for the room occupied by Robert and her mother. They spent over 2 hours together, followed by an additional hour strolling the grounds, chatting, and laughing. Eventually, I observed Mary checking her watch and exchanging words with her mother before departing towards the main complex building. I didn't feel inclined to engage in conversation with her at that moment, so I slipped out the back of the building. Moments later, I watched as her car exited the parking lot, returning her to her seemingly contented home. I felt a pang of sadness, realizing that my relationship with Mary might not be as strong as I had believed. Meanwhile, Pamela and Robert remained seated by the koi pond, lost in each other's company. That night, I found solace with Richard. I appreciated her patience in allowing me to initiate intimacy, and I was overjoyed by her enthusiastic response. I also made sure to compensate Barbara with $100. However, my elation was short-lived as I received some unwelcome news. Richard had made some significant changes in her life. Not only had she sold her house, but she had also offloaded her business to a group of the more seasoned young women who had pooled their resources to buy her out. Surprisingly, her college degree turned out to be an MBA, equipping her with the financial savvy to maneuver investments for optimal returns. As a result, she wasn't just well off, she was downright wealthy. For the past year, she had been overseeing the extensive refurbishment of a house she had purchased in Mérida, Mexico. Now that the renovations were complete, she was ready to make the move. By now, I knew her well enough to understand that she wouldn't broach the subject herself. Despite my uncertainty about the future, I knew I had to ask. "Richard, is there any chance I could join you?" Her response came not in words, but in a warm smile and an embrace. This woman had encountered countless men, yet somehow I had become the one she chose to stay with. Flattered yet bewildered, I decided against probing her motives and instead chose to embrace them. "Peterson, I believe we can make this work, if you're willing," she offered. "I suppose I'll need to get a divorce," I ventured. "Absolutely not. You'd risk losing half of everything you have. Let me handle everything for you. We'll be leaving in 10 days. Are you certain about this?" she inquired. "Oh, yes, absolutely," I affirmed. By the way, where exactly is Mérida? The following week was a whirlwind of activity. Thankfully, my passport was up to date. Richard arranged for a document allowing me to sell my unit at Wagon Wheel Acres back to the management. While it wasn't a substantial sum, I did manage to recoup 80% of the original purchase price. Richard took care of all the logistics for our move to Mérida. She opened a Citibank account for me, which operated as Banamex in Mérida. She assured me that I'd have enough funds to live comfortably, especially since I wouldn't have rent or utility expenses. The proceeds from selling my apartment went into this account, followed by the funds from my checking and savings accounts. My retirement package from Russell Industries included an annuity account designed to safeguard my assets. Fortunately, Richard had connections willing to purchase the annuity for a fixed sum. Remembering those commercials where people shouted, "It's my money, and I want it now," I was skeptical, but I ended up receiving 82% of the account's value. While I forfeited monthly payments, I received a substantial cash payout, depositing nearly $800,000 into my Citibank account. Selling my Toyota was a breeze, providing me with extra cash for incidental expenses. By then, Richard had set up an account for me at Banamex in Mérida, allowing me to transfer funds from Citibank whenever needed. I also arranged for my Social Security check to be deposited automatically, a process that required a trip to the local Social Security office. A bit of a hassle, but worth it for peace of mind. In the final days before our departure, I spent all my time at Richard's place. Kenneth informed me that Pamela hadn't even noticed my absence. Of course not. I gave Kenneth my HGTV as a parting gift. With my departure, payments to Wagon Wheel Acres ceased, meaning no more financial support for Pamela. From now on, Robert Nelson would be footing the bill for his lover. Describing the houses in Mérida is a challenge. It feels more akin to a quaint village in Spain or Italy. The homes boast pastel hues tightly clustered together, appearing simple and unadorned from the outside, yet boasting elaborate interiors. Richard and I swiftly settled into our new abode, with her shouldering all expenses. I attempted to offset this by showering her with small gifts, until she firmly insisted I desist. Everything felt harmonious, until one day, 6 months later, Mary appeared. Richard graciously welcomed my daughter into our home before excusing herself to run errands. I found myself alone with my child, though I had no inclination to converse. "Dad, what are you doing here? You have to come home," Mary declared, her frustration evident. I struggled to find a response to her blunt opening. Gesturing for her to take a seat, I asked, "Can you be more specific?" Mary appeared even more exasperated. "You left without a word, taking everything with you." "Yeah, so what?" I replied nonchalantly. "What about Mom?" she pressed. "What about her?" I invited her to join me, but she chose to stay with Robert. I lied, fully aware of the falsehood. Mary had no way to verify my claim. "But you took everything, our savings, your retirement account. What was she supposed to do?" Mary persisted. She seemed content without me. In fact, she wanted nothing to do with me. Why are you here now? I countered. You can't just abandon her. She's your wife, Mary admonished. The last time you visited Wagon Wheel Acres before I left, you spent 3 hours with Robert and Mom, but none with me. Why? Mary's accusatory tone sliced through the air. I tried to find you, but you weren't in your room, I replied defensively. After 3 hours, was I just an afterthought? Some obligation, she retorted sharply. Don't be dramatic. Mom was happy with Robert. She wanted me to get to know him, I explained, attempting to diffuse the tension. Fine. Let him take care of her. Did you know she was sleeping in his room with him? Mary's voice crackled with frustration. Yes, she claimed you no longer wanted to share a bed with her, I admitted reluctantly. Did you actually believe that? What do you want, Mary? Why did you bother to find me and come here? I'm not going back. I won't allow her to flaunt her infidelity in my face. It was humiliating and degrading, and if you can't see that, you need help, I countered, my voice tinged with bitterness. John and I can't afford her fees at Wagon Wheel Acres anymore. Her Social Security doesn't cover half the expenses, and they won't let her stay without full payment, Mary explained, her voice softening. What about Robert? Wasn't he supposed to help out? I questioned. Robert Nelson was moved to the Alzheimer's wing 3 months ago. Mom can't stay in the same room, and we can't afford a separate unit, Mary revealed, her tone heavy with resignation. So, you want me to give her money so she can stay close to her lover? I demanded incredulously. Dad, she's comfortable there. She wants to stay because it's safe and familiar, Mary pleaded. Bullshit. She wants to be near him, even if he no longer knows who she is. I won't let her use me for this, I declared firmly. You're not being fair, Mary protested. Why don't you let her live with you? Your house is big enough, I suggested. We offered, but she refused. She wants to stay at Wagon Wheel Acres, Mary admitted, sounding defeated. I rose from my chair and headed to the front hallway. Retrieving my hat from the peg by the door, I glanced at Mary. She had traveled over 1,000 miles for nothing. Her mother had betrayed me, and now my daughter was trying to guilt-trip me for not accepting the humiliation. I'm going to the market. Close the door on your way out, I said tersely, knowing exactly where I could find Richard. As I walked away, I realized I would never understand what drove Pamela to act as she did. But I didn't care anymore. I found contentment in my Adobe Hacienda. Thank you for watching this video to the end. If you liked it, please like it and subscribe to the channel. See you soon.